Today we're taking a look at the latest NHL rumors on guys like Vladimir Tarasenko. We're also looking at Morgan Rielly and Kirill Kaprizov. Is there a stalemate between he and the Minnesota Wild? We also have several signings today, including Tyler Bozak and several other news items as well. All that coming up next. So welcome back to another video here at Top Shelf Hockey. Now, as I mentioned, we have a variety of NHL news and rumors to talk about here today. First up, I do want to acknowledge the passing of longtime NHL veteran Fred Stanfield, who played 14 years in the NHL, won 2 Stanley Cups with the Boston Bruins in 70 and 72, played for 4 total teams, including the Buffalo Sabres, where he made a Stanley Cup final appearance as well. Certainly had a pretty solid NHL career, and he passed away last night at the age of 77. So we would certainly like to pass along our condolences to the longtime NHL veterans, family, and friends. Now, as I mentioned, we also had several other news items today. One other quick tidbit as well. We did find out that the Winter Classic is going to have a new sponsor. For the longest time, it's been the Bridgestone Winter Classic. Bridgestone will no longer be the sponsor for that event. It will now be sponsored by Discoverers. Of course, new sponsorship deals usually bring in more money, so I'm sure overall, from a financial standpoint at least, it's probably a good thing for the NHL. Now, when it comes to the other signings that we saw today, we get a variety of NHL players put their names on some contracts today, as well as some professional tryouts. The St. Louis Blues today announced they finally signed longtime forward Tyler Bozak, who's been in the NHL a long time, of course, one of the top veteran guys that was still unsigned. He played the last 3 years with the Blues after leaving the Maple Leafs via free agency, signed a 3-year times $5 million contract with them 3 years ago as a free agent, and now extends, but this is a 1-year deal at league minimum $750. However, there is some bonuses built into this where he's a plus 35 contract. There is a couple of ways he can earn more money. The contract can be worth upwards of $2 million. It includes a games played bonuses as well as some team playoff success bonuses in there as well. I don't have the exact details on the playoff structure, but it's likely going to mean the further they go into playoffs, the more he can earn. And of course, the games played reflects how much of a role he's playing with the team as well. So he's guaranteed at $750, but it could go up as high as $2 million. So they could end up having some bonus money there impact their cap situation next year. And we're also going to talk about this contract and how this kind of complicates things even further for the Blues when it comes to Robert Thomas and Vladimir Tarasenko, which we'll get into here in just a few moments. So stay tuned for that additional Blues discussion. Now, we also saw the Detroit Red Wings today sign forward Givani Smith. He gets a 2-year contract, $750,000 for both years. He was a restricted free agent. He's now signed. That concludes all of the business now for the Red Wings as far as outstanding contracts go for their offseason. So I think overall, Yzerman's done a relatively good job, and we'll see what this next season brings for the Red Wings. I'm sure we're going to see more pain and suffering, but they've certainly got a lot of good prospects in the system here, and see what they can start moving things along. But they're likely going to be a few more years before they're kind of getting back to that stage where they're more competitive, I would think. And we also saw the New Jersey Devils announce several PTOs today, so some professional tryout agreements for NHL forwards Jimmy Vesey and Mark Jankowski, as well as Tyler Witherspoon. So this is probably a scenario where New Jersey's a pretty young team. Vesey and Jankowski can come into camp, and if they look decent and they feel like they're a better option rather than rushing one of their younger forwards that may not be ready yet for regular NHL duty, then they'll likely get signed and be given an opportunity. I'm not sure that they'll sign both of them, but I can see one of them at least likely landing a job there, depending on how camp goes, of course. And of course, also depends, like I said, on how their younger prospects look. If they get enough guys that are ready, then these guys could end up possibly being released. But the fact that they're going to camp with anybody at all is a good thing. It might get them into some NHL preseason games. It gets them in the eyes of the scouts again. They can show what they're able to do. And even though they may not get a contract where they're actually trying out, they could still lead to other things with other teams, depending on who takes notice and what other teams are in the market for. So I'm sure we'll probably see several more announcements of that regard, likely here in the coming days, since we're just about a week and a half away from NHL training camps getting started. Now, before we jump into the remainder of today's video, I do want to pause for a moment and acknowledge our channel sponsor, Manscaped. Top Shelf Hockey is proud to be sponsored by Manscaped. Of course, with Manscaped, we have a special offer here for all Top Shelf Hockey viewers where you can get 20% off and free shipping on all orders at manscaped.com. Now, of course, Manscaped just launched a brand new Lawnmower 4.0 trimmer, which is a fantastic product. They've taken the level up here, even again with the skin-safe replaceable blades. It's waterproof, it's wireless charging, has a travel lock on it, as well as a nice light so you don't miss what you're doing. So certainly a terrific product. Now, many people associate Manscaped with their trimmers, which is certainly kind of their top product, but they do have a lot of other great options as well, including what they call the Weed Whacker, which is another trimmer for your ears and nose. And they have a variety of deodorants and sprays as well, which also keep you fresh and are terrific as well. So certainly Manscaped has a lot to offer, and we certainly highly recommend all of their products. So check out manscaped.com and use promo code TSH for 20% off and free shipping. So thanks very much for watching our promotional content. I do greatly appreciate it. Also want to take a quick moment as well and shout out all of our channel membership holders. You're all awesome for contributing to the monthly success of this channel. Your contributions are greatly appreciated. Also want to shout out and thank everybody who's been buying the merchandise lately. We've sold a lot of hoodies and t-shirts, phenomenal sales, and thank you very much for your support. Also, greatly appreciated. Now, jumping back into the content here today, I want to talk back here about the St. Louis Blues. As we talked about the Bozak signing, which was reportedly on the table quite some time ago. It was rumored that he also had some other options, which were rumored to be the Winnipeg Jets and the Pittsburgh Penguins, but he chose to stay in St. Louis. I know Andy Strickland had indicated that there was a one-year deal around $1.5 million or so on the table back earlier in the offseason, and I think maybe the structure of this deal had to change because I don't think that deal was still on the table, at least not as is, but that really complicates the salary cap situation now for St. Louis. The fact that Bozak gets his contract made official before they even get their own younger RFA center, Robert Thomas, under contract, certainly makes that situation more complicated. And of course, the Tarasenko situation is complicating everything since he has not been traded. I know we've heard a lot from Craig Berube and Doug Armstrong, several members of the Blues indicating that they fully expect Tarasenko to be with them to start the season and that they're totally okay with that. They feel they can work through this. And that's all fine and dandy, but you have a cap problem on your hands, and Robert Thomas, to me, is a pretty important piece. I know he's somebody that they feel and hope that longer term will be the consistent, solid number 2 center. And right now, he doesn't have a contract. Apparently, according to Jeremy Rutherford of The Athletic, he says that one of the main things contributing to this, stalemate, I guess you could call it, or lack of contract, is the Jordan Kyrou contract. He got a 2-year deal at $2.8 million, and it looks like Thomas expects at least that or more, according to the reports that he has access to from inside information, and I can understand why that would be. There is a bit of an argument to be made that Robert Thomas is certainly a little bit more established as an NHL player. Obviously Kyrou's put in a little bit more time in the minors, and certainly was a little bit more dominant between his time in junior and the American Hockey League, but still, at the NHL level, I think where it matters most, Thomas has more time spent, and certainly some pretty solid numbers. This past year was not great for him. Battled a lot of injuries. His numbers were impacted by those injuries, and it doesn't look the greatest statistically, but the 2 years leading to that, he's well on pace to become a regular solid number 2 centerman in the NHL, in my opinion. For him to be looking at a 2 or 3 year contract on a bridge deal around $2.8 to $3 million to me doesn't seem overly unreasonable. To some, it might. Obviously, to Doug Armstrong and company, it does. Obviously, it looks like they likely want him to come in somewhere between 2 and 2.5 or so is probably what we're looking at. I think they were hoping he would do like a 2x2 deal, but that doesn't seem to be going anywheres because they signed Sanford at $2 million. They get Kyrou at 2.8. They get Barbashev around 2.5, and I think they kind of want Thomas somewhere in between, or either that, or at the very least, at the most, between Kyrou and Barbashev, but no more than Kyrou. And he says, hey, let's look at our histories here. I'm worth more. And now that they've signed Bozak, they even have less cap space to work with to get this deal done at all. They only have, according to Cap Friendly, about $750,000 in cap space at this point. They can kind of create a little bit more flexibility by adjusting their roster. Details on cap friendly right now to come to that conclusion has 8 defensemen on a roster and 13 forwards, so they can demote some younger players that some of them might even need waivers. Like the forward that would have to be dropped down to go to 12 forwards likely would need waivers, and then you're looking at a couple defensemen, probably like a Wallman or a Mikula, that would have to be demoted as well. So they can probably create themselves around $2 million or a little bit better in cap space between what they can do there. You're probably looking at, like, because most of the contracts they could demote would be between $700,000 and $900,000. Most of the D-men are around $750,000. You throw in one contract from the NHL level at the forward group around $900,000. So now you're looking at about 2.4. They have 700, so you're just over $3 million. So I mean, if you can get Thomas a sign around $3 million or a little bit less, you can squeeze it all in, and you still give yourself a little bit of flexibility there, but not very much. But obviously, this Tarasenko situation is really holding things up. I mean, he makes a lot of money, and it's been obviously reported numerous times through this offseason that he wanted a trade, he wanted out, he wants a fresh start, he was not happy with how his surgery was handled and all that. And if a deal could be had where they could actually move him and save some money, then that very well would make a big difference to their situation. I know we've seen reports from Andy Strickland before, not that long ago, in the past week or so, even saying that he's, according to what he knows and what's been told, that there's at least one team out there that would be willing to broker a deal in a Tarasenko trade to retain some of that salary to make the cap hit a little more flexible and easier for the acquiring team. So, you know, I still think there's a possibility a team like the Devils or the Islanders could look to this. I mean, I know New Jersey at this point it may not make as much sense for them, but they've really made a ton of moves this offseason to really improve that team. I'm not sure they're going to be good enough to go to the playoffs here right away, but they're still going to be greatly improved. I think that's fair to say for sure. When it comes to the Islanders, though, that is going to be a tough situation. I know they're in a situation there with LTIR that they're kind of getting to the point where they're pretty well tapped out. We don't even know officially 100% what Zach Parise is getting paid. I'm assuming it's $1 million or less, because that details, at least I don't believe that's ever been confirmed or released by the team. They would have to trade a player that's making somewhere close to $5 or $6 million to make that deal happen. We're probably talking about Josh Bailey if it were to happen, but I do think that it's more likely that the Islanders would probably go after a defenseman. So we'll see here what happens, but I know it's possible that Tarasenko can start the season as a Blue, that a trade may not materialize, and that Robert Thomas is maybe going to have to take a little bit less money, but if he kind of holds firm on what he's looking for, it might force the Blues to make a deal to free up some space to get him under contract. So we'll have to see. There's some moving parts there that can certainly all impact each other. And with only about a week and a half from training camp, I would suspect we could see some movement there in St. Louis to shake things up a little bit. Now, as I mentioned as well, we want to get an update on the Kirill Kaprizov situation. According to Michael Russo of The Athletic, things appear to be again at a bit of a stalemate between Kaprizov and Bill Guerin's camp. Obviously, this is not going well. At one point, we heard that he was going to play in Russia, which we know turned out to be false. It was certainly a situation where they were bluffing, but trying to gain some leverage. Didn't really work. We know that the Wild really wanted to sign Kaprizov to a 7 or 8 year long-term extension, which they didn't have any interest in. They wanted the shortest term as possible. He and his agent are trying to get to unrestricted free agency as quickly as possible. So right now, it seemed like they were likely, at least reports were indicating from Russo, that they were close to agreeing and kind of meeting in the middle around a 5-year deal. That seemed to be somewhat agreeable. And according to Russo, the Wild has reportedly offered Kaprizov $9 million a year on a variety of terms. But yet he's yet to accept and sign a contract. So what's holding things up? Is it the structure of the payments? Is it signing bonus money compared to salary? Is it, the trade clauses? I mean, you have to have so much NHL experience before you can even qualify for that. So that wouldn't even be effective and for the bulk of the contract anyway. He needs a couple more years of experience before that could, be a possibility, but it could be worked in for those years down the road if they do a 5-year deal. But I mean, at this point, this guy's got a well-decorated career in Russia. He's got a lot of success in the KHL. He's got a lot of success representing Russia in international tournaments between the Olympics, World Juniors. He's had some phenomenal tournaments, scoring some huge goals. He's a heck of a hockey player, but he's played one NHL season, and it was a shortened season at that. It was in limited divisional play only. He still has several, all kinds of NHL teams that he hasn't even played against. And he's looking for this kind of money with all, it's just, to me, it blows my mind on how messy this has gotten and how demanding they're being for this contract. Like, yes, the kid's super talented, could be a big star, but at this point, I think, it's quite likely that he's going to miss training camp, or at least a good chunk of it. Even if he signs today, he might not be able to play for the start of the year. If you think about it, and I mentioned this before, it takes a fair bit of time. It can take 3 to 4 weeks from the time they get their contract signed, they get their work visa in place, and they have to quarantine, depending on where they're coming from. Like, based on NHL protocols, it looks like he's gonna have to quarantine for 7 days when he arrives. Like I said, plus you need time to get that work visa in place before he can even travel over. Camps start in 9 days, I believe it is. He's not even going to be here. There's no doubt he's going to miss part of training camp for sure. Pretty good chance he can miss all of camp. And if this drags on even into next week, there's a really good chance he's not going to be there for the start of the season. So, could he still sign in Russia, even though that season is kind of getting underway and it looks like it's not a possibility? I wouldn't be completely shocked if he did somehow sign a contract and play the game, because as soon as he puts on the uniform and plays one game over there, they're going to try to possibly use that, in my opinion, as leverage to get what they want. And I'm not sure Bill Guerin's going to cave or not, but it's certainly a situation where things are getting really messy. I'm not sure what more Bill Guerin has to do to get this guy to sign. They're basically throwing everything at him that he appears that he wants. It's got to be contract structure, to me, is the only thing that makes sense as to what is holding things up. But it's just ugly, and at this point, I'm not sure what to tell Wild fans, but expect him to likely not be in the lineup when the season starts. It's just looking almost impossible at this point. And lastly here, I want to touch on the Leafs and Morgan Rielly. Of course, we talked a bit about the Leafs a few days ago, and we now have another article on Sportsnet, this time from Luke Fox, examining what they might do with the stud defenseman who's likely going to be in line for a major payday and a huge raise next offseason if he remains an unrestricted free agent, which is extremely likely at this point in time. But this article goes on to talk about the fact that this Maple Leafs team, even though they have not had any playoff success under the current regime and the current group of players, they've had a lot of regular season success, but they've also seen a lot of players leave and walk through free agency, not getting anything in return. And it's really starting, it's been for a while, in my opinion, looking bad on how they manage their assets and not getting any kind of return. We've seen guys like James Van Riemsdyk, Tyler Bozak, Jake Gardiner, Freddie Anderson, Zach Hyman, Tyson Barrie all leave as free agents, getting nothing in return. And is Morgan Rielly going to be next? It's pretty likely at this point, looking at all the contracts for some of the top D-men around the league this past offseason, quite likely that Rielly's contract is going to be at least $8 million, and that's, if he were to give a discount, probably looking at more like 9 or in that 9 range. So can the Leafs afford that on a flat cap with $40 million tied up in 4 players? I don't think so. That's not really a possibility. They're already in a situation where they've had to let all these guys walk because they can't afford to keep them, and they're trying to find cheaper alternatives to replace them. And it could just be another situation where this happens yet again. Now, would they consider a Morgan Rielly trade? I'm going to say, unless they're in a situation where the season has gone horribly wrong and they're not going to make the playoffs, it's extremely unlikely. The article also goes over the fact that they're very, very fond of their own rentals, which a lot of teams like to do, but they've done it so many times and then the player has left that, like I said, it's just creating a situation where these guys are letting their contracts run out and they're leaving because the Leafs can't afford to keep them, and they're not getting anything in return. So as much as they have a young, exciting hockey team with guys like Matthews and Marner and Nylander and, the guys coming up like Sandin and Robertson, there's just not a whole lot in the pipeline. Like, they have to be careful about future asset management here, which I know that's something they think about. But, at this point, if they get all these guys leaving and nothing coming back, it's going to hurt longer term. This article, he does kind of go over a lot of different scenarios. And then obviously, I agree with them that a trade is extremely unlikely. So I'm not here to say that I think Morgan Rielly's going to be traded. If they wanted to asset manage properly, something they probably should have considered this offseason. I know I was advocating earlier in the year before we got to free agency. I thought they should have considered a Rielly trade for an effort to keep Hyman myself. I thought if they do that, they can save enough money that they might be able to keep Hyman and maybe Anderson, or they might be able to go a different road. Hyman, I thought, was the much more important piece to keep. But, I mean, not that they don't need Rielly. They do need a defenseman who can do all the things that he does. But I personally think that Rasmus Sandin is pretty close to being ready for a much bigger role. And obviously having him there on his entry-level deal would save a lot of money. So they could get possibly similar production there and take the Rielly contract and go after keeping a guy like Hyman in the fold. But they chose not to do that. I mean, Kyle Dubas has been on the Bob McCown podcast, as I mentioned. Lots of quotes there where he essentially looked at the fact and said that, listen, we're not really looking at any contracts that are expiring. We're not looking at, beyond the current year. We're just focusing on getting the job done essentially for the coming season. He also admit that if they don't have playoff success this year, or heaven forbid miss the playoffs, that there likely would be substantial organizational change, which you can certainly understand. You can only go so many times back into the well with the same group without getting the success you need to justify everybody keeping their jobs and moving on as a group. But to me, it's a real possibility that Morgan Rielly could end up walking. This article makes a ton of sense. And I do think it's going to be a situation that regardless of how the season goes, it's the most likely outcome, because I think the Leafs will be in the playoff picture. I expect them to be that. And if they are, they're not going to trade him. That would make no sense unless you can bring in another player on a better contract who could do the same job. And that's not an easy task. So it's just, to me, it's a little bit of a mess. Poor asset management. But we'll see. They need to get playoff success this year, or the whole thing's a bust anyway, and we could see some heads roll in Toronto. Be interesting to see how this season unfolds. Let me know your thoughts on everything discussed down below in the comments. We'll discuss further. If you're new to this channel, make sure you subscribe and stick around. We'll keep you up to date with all the latest news, rumors, and analysis on all 32 NHL teams. Thank you for watching, and I will catch you next time.